Welcome my friends to a new episode of Frameworks. And in this session, we're going to talk about the Receptive Skills Framework. And we're going to focus on reading. So let's start. So in order to make things easy, the Receptive Skills Framework has three main blocks: pre-reading, while reading, and post-reading. So these are the three main blocks in teaching reading. Now let's start with pre-reading. And when we say pre-reading, it's clear from the name. It is what you do as a teacher before students get to the reading passage, which actually differentiates between traditional teaching and modern teaching. Because in traditional teaching, what happens? A lot of teachers, when they go to the classroom in the reading lesson, all what they do is that they give the passage to students to read. And there is no pre-reading tasks, nothing. Now let's talk about the pre-reading block. What happens inside that block? Now if we talk about the pre-reading block, then we're talking about some stages that are essential and some stages that are optional. So there are things in this framework that have to happen, and there are things that that you might choose from. So let's start with a necessary stage, which is leading. As we said in the previous episode, every framework in English language teaching starts with a leading stage. And we said before that leading is for attracting students' attention. So let's have a look at an example here, taken from a course book, a wonderful course book. And let me show you first the passage. And the passage is entitled, "Laughter is the best medicine." I can't agree more. Laughter is the best medicine here. So let's see whether the book gives us a leading or not. And it says here in 4a, look at the photos and the headline of the article on page 11. What do you think the article is about? We say here, look at the photos in the headline of the article on page 11. What do you think the article is about? I say, no, that's not a leading. In a leading, we need to attract the students' attention to the topic. So back to the passage one more time. Let's see what the topic is. And again, laughter is the best medicine. So wonderful. So now the topic is laughter. Then we need to come up with a leading that would grab students' attention and get them interested in that topic, which is laughter. And we said that there are so many ways of doing that. And I don't want to repeat myself, but we said you can search for a quote on laughter from the internet. You can bring a picture where people are laughing, and then you start asking your students questions. You can bring a video about maybe a 2 or 3 minute video where people are talking about laughter. You can actually ask students questions about, the last time they laughed and why they laughed and whether laughter is important or not, or that kind of thing. And then after that, we come to another stage, and it's an essential stage as well. We call it context setting. And in context setting, we also try to grab our students' attention to the context of the reading passage. Now someone might say, and what is the difference now between leading and context setting? And I would say leading is more general. So in leading, for example, with this lesson, you'll be asking students about laughter in general. And then in order to move to the context setting, you will ask your students a question like this one. Do you think that laughter can be used as medicine? How? Why? Where have you heard this? Why do you think that, that laughter can be used as medicine? What makes you think so? And you ask that sort of questions. So again, the difference between leading and context setting is like moving from what is more general to what is more specific. Like, imagine that you've got a passage about Michael Jackson. So maybe your leading can be about pop music in general or famous singers. And then your context setting is about Michael Jackson, because that's very close to the context of the text. So again, in teaching reading, you need to start with these two stages: leading followed by context setting. Someone might ask, Shadi, can we put them both together in one stage lesson planning? Yeah, no problem, not a big deal. Okay, not a big deal. Yes, of course you can do that. Then after that, we have two optional stages that can happen actually in the first block, which is the pre-reading block. And lucky us, these two stages are realized actually in the following questions in the course book. So let's have a look at question 4a, and let's read it again. Look at the photos and the headline of the article on page 11. What do you think the article is about? And let's analyze this together. Look at the photos and the headlines. The photos and the headlines. Let's go and see the photos and the headlines. Oh, look, we can see a couple of photos here. And we see also the title, the headline. And then what is the rest of the question? And look at what is being said here. And what do you think the article is about? Now, let me analyze this. Look at the photos and the headline of the article on page 11. And when we go to page 11, that's what we see. Oh, a couple of pictures, one up there and one down there, and then we've got the title or the heading. Okay, lovely. Now, when the coursebook writer asks you to look at the photos and the headline, this is a reading sub-skill that we call text previewing. So text previewing is looking at the layout, looking at the pictures, the headline, looking at the subheadings, the title, you know. So this is what we call text previewing. It's a reading sub-skill. Now, this is followed by what do you think the article is about? Now that's another reading sub-skill. We call it prediction. The ability of the reader to predict the content of the text. And these two are mixed here in one question. So we've got text previewing and we've got prediction. And both are in one question here. Now, so if we're going now to think about the stages, we said leading, and then we have context setting. And as we see, we've got text previewing and prediction represented in 4a. Now let's go to B, and let's read it carefully. Before you read, check these words, phrases with your teacher or in a dictionary. So either with the teacher, which would be what we call guided discovery. And guided discovery is a way of presenting language. And then he said, or in a dictionary, which is self-directed discovery, where students study language on their own, and both are okay. Now, here is a very important question. Why would I ask my students to focus on some vocabulary before we move to the reading passage? Is because these vocabulary items might be blocking. They might be difficult and at the same time essential for understanding meaning. And that's why it's very important to pre-teach them before students start reading the passage. And this is a stage that we call pre-teaching vocabulary. Now, is this a stage a must? No, it's an optional stage. So now if we're thinking about the first block for teaching reading, we would say number one, leading. That's an essential stage. And then we have context setting. That's also another essential stage. And then we have text previewing and prediction. And then we have pre-teaching vocabulary. These last two are optional. And the first two are necessary. Good, lovely. Now, then we come, my friends, after that, to the while reading block. And in the while reading block, if we're talking about a 45-minute lesson, then you need, at least in the while reading part, you need to focus on 2 reading sub-skills. And you need to start with an easy sub-skill, then move to something that is more challenging. Why we start with an easy task and then move to something that is more challenging? Simply because it makes sense. We need to start giving the students easier tasks, and then those easy tasks then later become more challenging. And someone might say, and Shadi, what kind of sub-skills? Well, there is a long list of sub-skills, reading sub-skills that you can focus on when you're teaching reading. Like what? Let me give you an example. Like, you can get your students to read for gist. What is reading for gist? It's reading for the main idea. Reading for the main idea. And all what the students need to do is to skim the passage quickly. It's kind of reading quickly. So the first sub-skill we're talking about here that you can focus on in the while reading block is what we call reading for gist. You can call it also reading for main ideas. You can call it also reading quickly. And you can also call it skimming. And another easy sub-skill is scanning. Now, scanning is to move your eyes on the text in order to find key specific information. Like what? Like figures, like numbers, names of people, names of cities, names of continents. Very, very, very specific pieces of information. And then we have reading for details. And reading for details is what we call sometimes reading carefully. Sometimes we call it intensive reading. And intensive reading is a kind of reading that needs focusing. So students need to read carefully in order to answer the questions. So of course, intensive reading is more challenging than skimming or scanning. Now also, another sub-skill that we have is guessing words from the context. This is also something that you can do in the while reading block. But be careful. If you're going to move to guessing words from the context, and in this scenario, you might need to let go of the pre-teaching vocabulary stage, because now you will take that pre-teaching vocabulary stage and turn it into something else. Maybe you will need to get students to guess words from the context now, so you wouldn't need to focus on these words in the pre-teaching vocabulary stage. So, another also skill that you might need to focus on is what we call understanding, opinion, and attitude. And this is when we ask learners to read the passage to understand the attitude of the writer or the writer's way of thinking. And this is also a more challenging reading sub-skill. So as you see, we've got a list of sub-skills that you can actually focus on during the while reading stage. And let me remind you again, so we talked about reading for gist. Number 2, scanning, which is reading for specific information. Also we have reading for details, which is reading carefully or intensive reading. And also we have guessing words from the context. And also we have understanding, opinion, and attitude. Right, now let's have a look at the course book we have, and let's see which of these sub-skills we talked about are in this reading lesson. And if we go to C, it says, read the article, match topics A to E to paragraphs 1 to 5. So if we're going to match topics A to E to paragraphs 1 to 5, then obviously this is reading for gist, because the students now need to focus on the main idea of every paragraph so that they can match. So here is the coursebook writer started with just reading, which is good because just reading is not that challenging. It's easy. And as we said, it's very important to start with what is easier and then move to what is more challenging. So let's continue. And then what happened? Let's go to activity now. Activity 5. And activity 5 says, read the article again. Find the answers to these questions. Where and when did laughter yoga clubs begin? How often do young children and adults laugh? What happens in May every year? How does laughter improve your health? What do people do at a laughter club? Why is fake laughter good for your health? So this is kind of intensive reading. Now students will need to read carefully to find answers to those 7 questions. And here in this lesson, while reading is represented only in these 2 sub-skills. Just reading, followed by reading in details. Now what's after that? Now after the first block, which is pre-reading, we have while reading. And after while reading, we have post-reading. So, wonderful. So we have pre-reading, and then while reading, and finally post-reading. Now let's talk about post-reading. And in post-reading, my friends, we have 3 things that we can do. Now students have read the passage. It is time now to turn this passage into a form of a production. And that's why we have either a writing task or a speaking task, and then we have a language analysis task. So let's talk about these 3. So now students read about laughter. You can ask them to write something about laughter. Or you can ask them to speak about the topic of laughter. Or maybe you've noticed some linguistic areas in the passage that you want students to understand and learn, so you decide to focus on that in the post-reading stage. Now here is a good question. Do we have to cover writing, speaking, and language analysis in the post-reading stage? No, you can choose only one of them. One of them can be enough. 2 of them also are okay. The 3 of them are okay. It depends on how much time you have and how much time you've got on your hand. So let's see what we have in this course book. So if we go to activity number B, it says, would you like to join a laughter yoga club? Why not? So this is a speaking task. So here the coursebook writer decided to start with a speaking task based on the topic of laughter, of course. And then let's go to activity number 6. And it's entitled Prepositions with Adjectives. So obviously, this is a language analysis task. And it says, look at the adjectives in blue in the article. Okay, those ones. Which prepositions comes after them? Wonderful. Focusing on important linguistic features in the text. Lovely. And then in B, match these prepositions to the adjectives. Sometimes there is more than one answer. Good. More language analysis. And then let's go to 7. Now the coursebook writer in 7 says, choose 6 adjectives from 6A and 6B write the name of one person you know for each adjective, and then work in new pairs. Tell your partner about the people. Now, this is a speaking task, another speaking task, focusing on what? Focusing on language analysis as well. So the writer, the coursebook writer here, didn't provide a writing task, fair enough, but he covered 2 stages in the post-reading block, the speaking task and the language analysis task. Wonderful. So if we're going to look at the whole receptive skills framework, and in this episode we focused on reading, so we have 3 main blocks: pre-reading, while reading, post-reading. And that was the receptive skills framework focusing on reading. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Next time, we'll be talking about the same framework, but we will be checking a listening lesson. See you next time, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Bye bye.